Hey there, Ginny Field here, and I'm excited that I get a chance to chat with my friend Lynn Madison. Lynn and I are both instructors. She's out of the Chicagoland area. I'm here in San Diego County, and we're both passionate about education in general. I think also education in the right spaces in the right areas, she and I spend a great deal of time together talking about what's happening with respect to buyer representation contracts, the accredited buyer representative class. And so Lynn and I were chatting the other day, and we started chatting about some of the things that we're currently seeing. And to me, it felt like it was the perfect topic, perfect opportunity to have a conversation about it and spend a little bit more time just talking about what's going on and how it affects the individual real estate agent and broker in our country. So I hope you enjoy this conversation. I always enjoy spending time with Lynn. She's one of my favorite people, and it's important to listen to. And I hope you will gain something from it. And as always is the case, at the end, you'll have our contact information. So I hope you enjoy. Hey there, Ginny Field here, and I'm really excited that I get to have some time hanging out with somebody I absolutely adore out of Chicagoland. Me in San Diego, I will tell you, I laugh at her regularly during the winter, and she usually laughs at me when there are fire seasons. But I adore this woman. We think of the same way. I've had the absolute joy to work with her, and I want to introduce you to Lynn Madison. And Lynn, just introduce yourself if you don't mind, and kind of tell the group about you.
Been in the real estate business quite some time and have took the normal track most people take. Top producing agent, became an award-winning managing broker. I'm only telling you that because I then morphed into doing training for the most part.
Same.
Still do list and sell a little bit, really selling more than listing because I travel too much, but I'm enjoying doing the education side of the real estate business. So yeah, that's what I do now.
I agree with you. And as you know, we've had one other interview in the past, and we talk about stuff all the time. And today, I think what's important for us to do is talk a little bit about, both of us have been around when sub-agency went away. And both of us experienced offers of compensation in the MLS back in the day, back when it all happened a long time ago, in the 80s, 90s-ish. Of $1 or 0 or 50 cents. I even had 150 cents, and the uproar that created. And I think we're coming full circle because there've been some changes made by some MLSs in the nation. And then in our conversation recently, we kind of talked about some of the stuff that's going on, because both of us preach wherever we go, whatever we're teaching, we're talking about this, because
Yes.
both of us having worked with agents, know our job should be to educate them on what to be paying attention to. So you and I talked about a story. Do you want to share a little bit about what's going on?
Yeah, as you mentioned, Ginny, there's 4 MLSs in the country that we are aware of that have gone to no longer making it mandatory that there be an offer of compensation in the MLS. In other words, these MLSs have looked at the future, and I believe realized that that's probably what's coming from all of these lawsuits that we've talked about in the past. And they are now allowing 0 in the MLS. MLSs that have not done that have always allowed $1 in the MLS.
Yes.
It's just that nobody was typically doing it over the last, 25, 30 years.
Correct.
But with all of this conversation going on about compensation, we're starting to see a lot of $1 or 4 cents in a chicken, or whatever you want to call it, in the MLS. So what's happening now that I am aware of, and this is only one example of what we believe is probably happening more than we are aware of.
Yes.
There was a listing in an MLS that was offering 0 compensation, in one of the MLSs that allows that. $650,000 listing. An agent showed and sold the property. And when she had to give to her brokerage company a copy of the listing so that they could calculate compensation on the buy side, which is typically what we all have to do when we sell something.
Yep.
The administrative assistant noticed that it said 0 in the MLS. So they then asked for her buyer representation agreement and the agreement that the buyer was going to pay the compensation, because there was nothing on the contract where the buyer had asked the seller to pay it. In other words, this is a brokerage company that recommends but does not require their agents to use the buyer representation agreement. They presumed she had one. She did not have one. There is no compensation being offered. And I got involved when they called me and said, what do we do now? And my response to them was, don't be spending the money you're not going to get. This is going to continue to happen until we all open our eyes and start to realize there is nothing. And then you hear things from people like, but that's not right. That's not the way things are done. We're supposed to get paid by the listing office. There's no rule that says they have to. And what we're starting to see, and we're talking about one example that I'm aware of, because the company that was involved called me and said, is there anything we can do? And I said, the only thing you can do is get paid by the buyer. They approached the buyer, and the buyer said, it was the first that the buyer had heard about any of this. So this agent didn't even explain anything to her buyer client. And the buyer, when it was explained to them, apparently said, I'm not paying you because you just told me that one of my options was to ask the seller to pay the compensation that I would owe you. You took that out of my control by not telling me I had that option. I'm talking about now, I want to meet this buyer because he's spot on.
Yeah.
Spot on.
Yeah.
That if I have a buyer representation agreement with my buyer, one of the options is the buyer can ask the seller to pay it when they're negotiating that contract. And they took that option out of that buyer's control. And the buyer said, I'm sorry, but I'm not paying on top of. He said, I'm not obligated to. I feel bad. I will tell you that he offered to give the agent, a couple of $1,000s for her, which I thought to myself was mighty generous on the part of the
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you and I've talked a lot about this because I hear two issues. Thing one, and we've spent a lot of time on this in our many conversations, is that and I talk about this, we are in a position where when you are sitting with a buyer, your job, it's no longer, hey, let's go shopping. Right. It's let's sit down and talk about stuff and let me explain how things are. That's thing one. If that didn't happen, then there's a failure. But then to me, this is me, and I'd love your thoughts. I also find too often there's not enough strength in education at the brokerage level to reinforce some of this, Lynn. So what are your thoughts on those two things?
Well, first of all, the first one, so I'm going to take the first one first, and then I'll come back to the brokerage level. I think that most of our agents are very good at articulating their value proposition to a seller, because we have needed to get the seller to sign that listing agreement. But most of them have no idea how to do that with a buyer. Correct. And if you expect to get a buyer representation agreement signed, it can't be because you just want them to sign it. You have to do the same thing with the buyer that you do with the seller, which is to spend some time with them and explain the value you bring to this transaction. There's absolutely no doubt about that. So yes, we need to help the agents understand how to create. They have a massive amount of value to their buyers. I'm not really sure that some of our agents even recognize what their value to their buyers is.
Totally agree with you 100%.
Let alone be able to communicate that.
Correct.
So agree. We need to help them be able to articulate that value proposition. But to the second point, I agree 100%. It starts at the top. I have agents because I do teach the ABR course, I do teach buyer representation, and I encourage and always have the use of buyer representation agreements. And I am told over and over again by the agents that when they talk to their brokers about that, the managing brokers, they hear things like, we don't do that here. The buyers won't sign it. Let me rephrase that. There is very little in the big scheme of things. Training going on at the brokerage level on using buyer representation agreements. That's part A. Part B, the managing brokers and the companies need to put their money where their mouth is. Because I think that most brokerage companies will not even go at, if I have a listing agreement with my seller that is for 90 days, and on the 89th day, the seller calls and says, thank you all for everything you've been doing, but we sold the house to my neighbor's daughter. We're not going to pay you anything. We just want to say thanks. It's been fun. Most brokerage companies will not go after that compensation. And they have every right to, because the seller breached it. Well, if they won't go after that, what I'm also hearing is they're not going after the buyers when the buyers breach the buyer agency agreements. So if you have a brokerage company that gives lip service to using a buyer rep agreement, but won't enforce a buyer rep agreement or a listing agreement, the agents see no point in even using them. I agree with you. It starts at the brokerage level.
And the thing that's unfortunate is that the brokers, I taught ABR in one of my favorite cities in California, in Santa Barbara, not too terribly long, last year sometime. And I was proud of the fact that there was a broker, one of the broker, independent company, really, really good, solid brokerage. And the broker was there. And he took 2 days with me because he wanted to understand this, because he understood it. But you and I both know that's kind of rare.
Yes.
And I, so we're both preaching it. And I know I've been honored to have you reach out to me on ABR. We both teach ABR. And of course, we both know the history of ABR, which was kind of created when sub-agency sort of went away.
Yes.
I mean, that's how far back it goes. And I think you've done a magnificent job in changing the way ABR is created. And if nothing more, if we can maybe use what we're talking about here as an impetus to help brokerages understand how important it is to teach their agents how, or send them. I've got 2 brokerages I'm working with right now that I'm planning on bringing ABR directly to their offices to teach it there, working on getting back with the Santa Barbara company I was mentioning and trying to do this. But I think that everybody at this point, and ABR was just redone or updated, or can you share a little bit what was done, please, Lynn?
Yeah, with all of what's going on, the outside pressure on all of this, I took the lead at the request of NAR, or the Real Estate Buyer Agent Council, REBAC, to update ABR. And we have now put scripts in there to help the agents be able to articulate their value proposition, and really beefed up the buyer counseling session, as well as the section on buyer representation agreements and how to have the, if you will, the compensation conversation with the buyers.
Yeah.
So we've really tried to bring it into something that can be used. And I agree with you, used in this market right now with what we're dealing with. And I agree with you, bringing it into the offices is a huge, but I'm doing 3 or 4 right now are on my schedule for the rest of this year and early into next year, in the Chicagoland area, and a couple in Louisiana, as a matter of fact, as well. Did one for a company in Nevada where I can use their forms and their company policy. And there's the benefit to the brokerages by bringing us into their brokerage company. Their agents get the designation, and we can use their stuff. We can't do that when we're at an association level class. This is really something that I think benefits immensely by bringing it into an office.
And I've got 2 booked this year. In fact, I'm teaching for North Carolina. And because it's via Zoom, I'm reaching out to everybody in my network to say, listen, you can, and I laugh and they say, well, it's early in the morning. Well, I'm the one that's getting up to talk about it. So if I can get up to talk about it, you can get up to be there to listen. So I'm hoping that maybe what we're doing right here can be an impetus and a support system to others to say, we really can't ignore this anymore. We've got to take some action.
We do. Absolutely.
Well, as always, my friend, I adore you and I'm so grateful. I call you friend. I love that we occasionally get together and sometimes at the end of the day with a glass of wine and kind of talk about stuff. And it's one of my favorite things to do. And I look forward to seeing you soon in Anaheim. But Oh,
See you
as
again.
always, my dear friend, I appreciate you so much, and
Thank
I
you.
really look forward to hopefully getting you're leading the charge, which has been brilliant, by the way. And I've
Thank
been
you.
honored to have a little tiny fragment of helping you, just a little bit, because it's really been you carrying the weight here, because you're as passionate as I am about how this has to be, how it
Yeah.
has to be, and
Yeah.
what needs to happen. So I appreciate you, my friend, and thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for taking a bit of time with me today.
Likewise. Thank you. Glad to be here.
Always a joy, Lynn. Bye, honey.
Thanks. Bye.
Well, when it comes to Lynn and I, we always have lots to talk about. And there's just so much, guys. And we we have the same heart for education. We have the same heart for helping our industry improve and taking it from the 35,000-foot view. So there was a lot talked about today. I would share with you that wherever you can find an accredited biorepresentative class sometime soon, you need to take it, because this is not going to go away. These changes are real. Multiple listing systems throughout the country are changing the way they're offering compensation. They're making, in some cases, $0 is okay or $1 is okay. And right now there's at least 4 that Lynn and I are aware of that have made those changes, which means the story that you heard in our conversation is real. And it's not something you can ignore. You must pay attention. So as always, there will always be new things coming up. This is a passion project of mine and Lynn's. And please pay attention. Reach out to either one of us. If you have questions, don't forget, please subscribe so that you just join me again, because I've got more things coming. And I look forward to seeing you next time. But please, if you have questions, reach out to Lynn or myself. Contact information will be at the end of the video, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks so much for watching.